No one ever noticed him. They rushed past, clutching coffee, charts and diagnoses, eyes down, eyes drained. But he simply sat there, silent, invisible, perched on a torn piece of cardboard, boots patched with tape, clutching an old notebook tight against his chest, watching. Always watching, until that morning, cold, heavy, filled with fear, the impossible happened. A billionaire walked through the hospital doors, his daughter in his arms, 6 years old, paralyzed. The doctors had said it already, there's nothing more we can do. But before he crossed the lobby, the boy's voice sliced through the frozen air like a blade. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." The billionaire stopped. The world stopped. Not because of the absurdity of the promise, but because of something in his voice. No doubt, no hesitation, only certainty. What that father didn't know, what no one in that hospital dared imagine, is that, in that very moment, all of their fates were being rewritten, because the real miracle wouldn't come from medicine or from wealth, but from the hands of a boy the entire world had chosen not to see. If this story already moved you in, these first few seconds, hit the like button, comment "Hope Conquers All" below, and subscribe to the channel right now, because what happens next will challenge everything you believe is possible. The wind cut through 7th Avenue like broken glass, sharp and merciless. People rushed in and out of the Children's Medical Center, wrapped in scarves, gripping cups of overpriced coffee, trying to outrun their own worries. But amid the swirling chaos of faces and footsteps, one figure didn't move. He sat perfectly still, a boy. 9 years old, dwarfed inside a coat 2 sizes too big. Its sleeves rolled high above his thin wrists. Duct tape held together the toes of his left boot. A red knit beanie clung low over his ears, barely shielding him from the cold. In his lap, a weathered notebook, pages frayed, corners curled, filled with careful sketches no one ever saw. His name was Ezekiel Carter, but nobody here knew that. Nobody ever asked. To most, he was just background. Maybe waiting for a parent inside, maybe lost, maybe none of their business. Until the moment he arrived, a silver Range Rover glided up to the curb and parked illegally by the fire hydrant. The engine kept running. The man inside didn't move. Jonathan Reeves, mid-40s, steel-grey temples, a loosened tie hanging off his sharp designer shirt. The kind of wealth that spoke without a word, polished, practiced, precise, but his face exhausted. In the back seat, a booster chair held his 6-year-old daughter, Issa, delicate, silent, her legs wrapped tightly under a pink blanket. The accident had stolen her childhood. In one brutal moment, doctors had given the same empty speeches for months now. Be patient. Long road ahead. Miracles take time. Jonathan exhaled, opening the door. He scooped his daughter into his arms, careful as if she might break, and carried her toward the entrance. That's when it happened. The voice, soft, steady, clear as glass cutting through the air. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Jonathan stopped mid-step, froze. He turned. Standing before him was the boy, skinny, shivering, eyes locked on his, and the words didn't sound like hope, didn't sound like desperation. They sounded certain. Jonathan stared at him, a child, homeless, dirty, alone. What could he possibly know? He tightened his grip on Issa and turned away, walking inside. But as he passed through the hospital's revolving doors, Jonathan couldn't silence the echo of that voice. It clung to him, followed him into the elevators, into the appointments, into every room filled with specialists delivering polite hopelessness. Because that voice, that impossible promise, had planted something in him far more dangerous than doubt. It had planted hope. Jonathan tried to shake it, tried to drown that boy's words beneath a flood of medical charts, MRI scans, and guarded optimism from men in expensive white coats. But he couldn't. As the specialists droned on inside sterile conference rooms, tossing around complicated terms and complex probabilities, Jonathan's mind kept slipping away. Back to that cardboard box. Back to that tiny voice outside the hospital. Back to the boy who had no business saying what he said, yet spoke like he knew something the doctors didn't. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." He kept hearing it. By early afternoon, the appointments ended, as they always did, with polite handshakes and non-answers. No breakthroughs, no progress, just more waiting, more bills, more of nothing. Jonathan carried Issa back out into the brittle afternoon air. The sun had broken through the clouds now, casting long shadows across 7th Avenue. The cold was sharp, biting at his face as they approached the car. And that's when he saw him again. Still there. Same place, same posture, same quiet. Focus. The boy wasn't begging, wasn't waving down pedestrians. He just waited, as if he knew Jonathan would return. Jonathan paused at the edge of the sidewalk. He glanced at Issa in his arms, her small face pressed into his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. She was awake, but silent, as always. He tightened his grip and crossed the street. Zeke looked up as they approached, his gaze unwavering, polite, unshaken, not a trace of fear or hesitation. Jonathan stopped directly in front of him. "You again." His voice was sharp. "Why would you say something like that? You think this is funny?" Zeke shook his head gently. "No, sir." Jonathan's tone sharpened further, the weight of months of frustration rising in his chest. "You don't even know her. You have no idea what she's been through." Zeke's voice remained calm, almost adult. "I don't have to know her to help." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He studied the boy more closely now, the tattered coat, the duct-taped boots, the battered notebook tucked under his arm. "You're what? 9? 10? "Almost 10. Zeke replied softly. Jonathan exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "You're just a child sitting out here in the cold. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter?" Zeke's eyes lowered briefly as his fingers traced the weathered edge of his notebook. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but even more certain. "My mama, she used to help people walk again." Jonathan froze. "She was a physical therapist. She taught me. She said, 'The body remembers even when it forgets.'" Jonathan stared at him, his skepticism clashing violently with the unsettling sense of something. Truth, desperation, madness, or something far more dangerous, a glimpse of possibility. He clenched his jaw. "I should walk away right now," Jonathan said, half to himself. Zeke didn't move, didn't flinch. "I should call security." Still, the boy remained, steady, present, unafraid. Finally, Jonathan huffed in exasperation. "Fine. You want to waste your time? Meet us at Harrington Park, tomorrow, noon. Don't be late." Zeke's answer came instantly. "I'll be there." Jonathan turned, loaded Issa gently into the SUV, and drove off. But as the car disappeared down the street, Zeke remained standing on that same cardboard box, silent, still, and ready. The next day, the sky hung low, grey and heavy, like it too was waiting to see what would happen. Harrington Park sat nearly empty. Only the occasional jogger passed by, cutting through the stillness. The swings creaked softly in the wind. But the basketball court sat cracked and lonely, and near the large oak tree, right on time, was Zeke. He sat cross-legged on the bench, his battered notebook nowhere in sight today. At his feet sat a small gym bag, modest, worn, but carefully packed. Next, to him, a folded towel, a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a plastic container wrapped in cloth, and a jar of cocoa butter. All tools that looked so simple, almost laughable, but he waited with quiet certainty. At 12:07, the silver SUV appeared. It slowed to a stop, and out stepped Jonathan, carrying Issa gently in his arms. Her pink blanket was wrapped tight around her legs. She smiled faintly at the sight of Zeke, though she looked uncertain, nervous, but curious. Jonathan wheeled Issa toward the boy, his expression unreadable, equal parts skepticism and something that almost resembled hope. As they approached, Zeke stood. "Hi again," he greeted softly. Jonathan gave a stiff nod. Issa waved shyly. "Hi, Issa," Zeke said, her name rolling off his tongue gently. Jonathan's eyebrows rose. "How do you know her name?" "You said it yesterday," Zeke answered simply. "I remember things." Jonathan exhaled sharply. He gestured toward the towel laid on the grass. "All right, kid, this is your shot. What now? Some magic trick? Miracle massage?" But Zeke wasn't fazed by the sarcasm. "No, sir. No magic, just the basics." He knelt beside Issa's chair and began unpacking the items. Jonathan watched closely. Every move, every breath. "The rice pack is for heat," Zeke explained. "It helps. Loosen tight muscles before we start. The ball is for pressure points. Helps stimulate the nerves." Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "You learned all this from your mother?" "I watched her help people who couldn't afford clinics or insurance. Veterans, workers, accident victims. She didn't have fancy machines. She used her hands, her patience." As he spoke, he gently lifted Issa's blanket, placing the warm, cloth-wrapped rice on her thighs. She flinched slightly at first. "Too hot?" he asked softly. "No, it feels good." For a few minutes, Zeke allowed the warmth to settle in, speaking softly to Issa about her favorite cartoons, her favorite colors, her favorite foods. Her answers came timidly at first, but slowly. Her shoulders relaxed. When he began gently moving her legs, he did so with careful, deliberate motions, rotating, extending, never forcing, just encouraging. Jonathan hovered behind, tense, ready to intervene at any hint of discomfort. "You ever do this before?" Jonathan asked, suspicion still clinging to his voice. "A lot of times." Zeke's tone was calm. "Mama said the body doesn't always need expensive stuff, just attention." Then came the first test. Zeke tapped lightly on Issa's knee. "You feel that?" She hesitated. "No." Zeke simply nodded. "That's okay, the nerves are still waking up. We'll keep asking." Jonathan crossed his arms tighter, biting back the frustration boiling inside. This was foolish, ridiculous, and yet he didn't stop the boy. Zeke continued working, blending simple therapy with patient conversation. He wasn't just treating her body, he was easing her fear. Every motion said, "You are safe, you are seen." 30 minutes passed. Another tap. On Issa's ankle now. A pause, her brow furrowed. A little like pressure. Zeke smiled for the first time. "Good." Jonathan blinked, his heartbeat quickening. "Sometimes she says that during her hospital sessions," he noted. "Yeah," Zeke nodded. "But hospitals are scary. Machines make kids tense up. Out here," he gestured to the open sky, "it's easier to let the brain remember what the machines can't teach." Jonathan didn't respond, but he was listening now, really listening. The session wound down quietly. As Zeke packed up, Jonathan couldn't help but ask one more time, "Why are you doing this?" Zeke paused, shrugged. "Because your daughter smiled." Jonathan froze. For the first time in months, someone had given him no sales pitch, no treatment plan, no contract, just kindness. And suddenly, that was terrifying. 1 week later, Harrington Park looked different. The trees had bloomed early that season. The sun warmed the grass, casting golden light over the cracked basketball court and rusted swing set. Birdsong filled the air, but none of it mattered to Jonathan Reeves as he pulled into the lot. His focus was on the boy waiting under the oak tree. As always, Zeke was there first. He always was. The Same gym bag neatly packed, the towel perfectly laid out, the simple tools carefully arranged like surgical instruments. But today, there was something more. Hope. Jonathan parked the SUV, walked around and lifted Issa out of her seat. She was already smiling. "Hi, Zeke," she called, waving as Jonathan wheeled her over. Zeke smiled softly. "Hey, Issa." Jonathan gave a small nod of acknowledgement. It was all he could offer, a silent truce between his doubt and his growing fascination. They got to work. The routine had become familiar now, heat packs on her legs, slow, gentle stretches, small range of motion exercises, every movement designed to remind her nervous system that the connection still existed, somewhere. But today, Zeke had something new. He pulled a long fabric belt from his bag, worn but clean. Jonathan raised. "An eyebrow. What's that for?" "Support," Zeke explained. "We're going to try something different. She'll control the movement. We just help guide." Jonathan crouched beside him, watching closely as Zeke positioned the belt under Issa's knees and showed him how to hold each end gently, like reins. "You ready?" Zeke asked Issa softly. She nodded, eyes focused. "Okay, sweetheart," Jonathan whispered, "just like we practiced." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Her face tightened in concentration, her lips pressed together. Then, slowly, her knees lifted. Not much, barely an inch. But they moved, together. Jonathan's mouth fell open. "You did that?" he whispered. Issa grinned. "I did it," Zeke nodded calmly, never breaking his rhythm. "Your body remembers. You just have to let it talk." Jonathan sat back on his heels, watching with wide eyes as Issa's knees lifted and lowered again. This wasn't theory anymore. This wasn't a trick. This was real. "You ever think about doing something else?" Jonathan asked suddenly, his voice. "Hey, quiet!" Zeke looked up at him, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," he said. "But this feels right." Jonathan stared at him for a long moment, trying to reconcile what he was witnessing. A homeless child, barely 10, performing what months of advanced therapy hadn't. No machines, no doctors, just knowledge and heart. After the session, as they packed up, Jonathan crouched again beside Zeke. His voice was softer this time, no longer skeptical, but full of something new. Respect. "Where do you go after this, Zeke?" Zeke hesitated, shrugged. "Around." Jonathan exhaled, lowering his voice. "You got a place to sleep?" A pause. "Sometimes." Jonathan rubbed the back of his neck, his voice barely above a whisper. "You ever think about staying with us for a while?" Zeke froze, his eyes widened, his chest rose in a sharp inhale. "You serious?" Jonathan nodded. "I've got a guest room. You wouldn't be in the way." Zeke looked down at his taped-up boots. "You sure?" "Your neighbors wouldn't mind a kid like me," Jonathan chuckled dryly. "Man, after what you've done for my daughter." "They better not say a word." Zeke didn't respond right away, but his eyes shined in a way they hadn't before. For the first time, he was considering something dangerous. Hope. The next morning, Zeke stood outside the Reeves home on Crestview Drive, backpack slung over his shoulder, rolled-up blanket under his arm. He looked small against the towering house, clean white walls, tall windows, a polished black door that gleamed under the morning sun. He hesitated for a second, then the door opened. Jonathan stood there, wearing sweatpants and holding a coffee mug, his usual sharp business suit replaced by something much simpler. "Right on time," Jonathan smiled. Before Zeke could say anything, Issa came running, well, rolling, into the hallway, her face beaming. "Zeke!" she shouted. He smiled softly. "Hey, superstar!" Jonathan stepped aside and opened the door fully. "Come in. Welcome home." The house felt warm, not just from the heater, but from something else. Something Zeke hadn't felt in a long time. Family. Jonathan showed him to a small guest room at the end of the hall. Simple, A bed with fresh white sheets, a desk, a lamp. Closet half empty, waiting. Zeke placed his worn blanket on top of the bed, but didn't dare sit at first. It felt too clean, too real. Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching. "You hungry?" he asked gently. Zeke nodded. They ate breakfast together. Pancakes with syrup that dripped too much, eggs scrambled perfectly, and orange juice that tasted like sunshine. Zeke barely spoke, but Isa filled the silence with chatter. "I told my teacher about you," she said proudly, mouthful of pancake. "She said you're like a little doctor." Jonathan chuckled. "A little doctor, huh?" Zeke blushed, lowering his head. The days turned into weeks. Zeke never missed a morning stretch. With Isa, they trained in the living room now, using yoga mats and improvised tools. Each day, Isa grew stronger. She was moving both feet now, toes curling, knees lifting, small victories that made Jonathan's throat tighten every time. But it wasn't just Isa changing, it was Jonathan too. The weight that had lived inside his chest for so long, the guilt, the fear, the helplessness, was slowly lifting. One night, as Jonathan washed the dinner dishes, he paused, water running, sponge in hand. He glanced over his shoulder. Zeke was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching quietly in his notebook. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Zeke?" The boy looked up. "You ever think about going back to school?" Zeke hesitated. "Sometimes," Jonathan nodded slowly. "You're smart, kid. You could go far." Zeke tilted his head. "I just want to help people walk again, like my mama did." Jonathan dried his hands and turned to face him fully. "Then let's figure out how to get you there." Zeke smiled softly. "Okay." They didn't say much more that night. They didn't need to. For the first time in years, the Reeves household wasn't filled with silence. It was full of small sounds that meant life, laughter, footsteps, pencil scribbles, and healing. It started small, like most things do. A nurse from the Children's Medical Center was walking her dog through Harrington Park one Sunday morning. She wasn't there to work, just to breathe, but as she crossed the path near the old oak tree, she stopped. Her eyes widened. There was Isa, smiling, lifting her knees, her toes curling, her legs moving, and right beside her, guiding her every motion, was that same boy who used to sit quietly outside the hospital doors. She didn't interrupt, she just watched. The nurse went home that night and told her sister, who happened to work in patient services, and within days, the quiet story of the little girl who was learning to move again because of a boy no one knew was traveling through hospital corridors like wildfire. The next weekend, when Jonathan and Zeke arrived at the park, they weren't alone. Two families were already waiting under the oak tree. One had a young boy who struggled to walk with a bulky metal walker. The other brought a girl recovering from a childhood stroke. Their parents had heard whispers about a quiet boy who was doing what doctors had said might take years, about movement, about hope. Jonathan paused when he saw them. He leaned towards Zeke. "You don't have to," he whispered. Zeke adjusted the strap of his gym bag. "I want to." That Sunday, Zeke gave up his usual time with Isa to help the two new kids. He showed their parents how to warm the rice packs just right, how to roll tennis, balls beneath their kids' feet, how to encourage but never push, and most of all, how to see their children not as broken, but as learning to be strong in a different way. Isa watched from her chair, quiet, her small hands folded in her lap. She didn't complain once. Later that day, during the ride home, Isa finally spoke. "I like watching him help people." Jonathan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Yeah. It makes me feel like I'm part of something good." Jonathan smiled quietly, because that's exactly what it was becoming. By the following weekend, 5 families showed up. The weekend after that, 11. A local pastor brought folding chairs. A nearby diner started dropping off bagels and coffee. Someone printed flyers that read, "Free movement classes, Sundays at noon, Harrington Park." They didn't print Zeke's name, but everyone knew who was behind it. One afternoon, a reporter from the Birmingham Sunday Post showed up. Jonathan pulled Zeke aside before the interview. "You okay with this?" Zeke looked around at the families. The kids, the parents, the hope filling the air. He nodded softly. "As long as it's not about me, it's about them." The article ran on page 2. 9-year-old with a gift helps dozens heal in a city park. They didn't publish Zeke's full name. He asked them not to, but word spread anyway. A local doctor offered to mentor him. A non-profit offered to donate supplies. Someone else offered free tutoring. For the first time since his mother passed, people weren't just seeing Zeke. They were seeing what he could become, but Zeke never changed. He still laid out the towel the same way every Sunday, still wore his duct-taped boots, still made sure Isa got her turn first before helping anyone. The park that once echoed with emptiness, was now filled with movement, and a boy who had no home had become the heart of something far bigger than himself. By now 9 Sundays had passed. 9 Sundays of towels laid carefully on grass, of tiny feet moving a little more, of parents whispering prayers they didn't dare speak aloud. But this Sunday, everyone felt it. Something was different. Even the air was still. The trees swayed slower. The usual nervous chatter had quieted. Isa was quiet too, unusually focused. No giggles, no questions. Just that same determined little girl Zeke had met months ago. When Jonathan's SUV pulled up, the small crowd was already waiting. Families setting up folding chairs, therapists kneeling with children, mothers clutching coffee cups. Breathing shallow, as if trying not to hope too loudly, Zeke was already there, sitting beneath the big oak tree. Like always, his old jacket zipped to the top, the duct tape still on his boots, and his gym bag packed with the same tools, the rice packs, the towel, the tennis balls, the cocoa butter. Jonathan wheeled Isa onto the mat. Zeke looked at her and gave the smallest nod. "You ready?" Isa didn't smile. She simply nodded back. They moved like a team. Jonathan took his place behind her. Zeke kneeled in front. The routine was the same. Heat the muscles, loosen the joints, let the body remember. But this time, the goal was different. "Today," Zeke whispered softly, "we help you stand." Jonathan's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" Zeke simply said, "She's ready." The parents around them grew quiet, sensing what was about to happen. A boy with nothing, a girl who had been told never, and a father who had run out of tears months ago. Zeke positioned Isa's legs carefully. Jonathan's hands gently cupped her underarms. "On 3, Zeke whispered. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan lifted. Zeke stabilized her knees, and Isa stood. For a moment, time stopped. Her legs trembled, her lips parted, her arms shook, but she was standing on her own 2 feet. Around them no one moved. Mothers covered their mouths, fathers blinked through tears. Even the therapist stood frozen, hands trembling. Isa opened her eyes, looked down at her feet, and whispered, as if afraid to break the moment, "I'm standing." Jonathan staggered back a step. His lips quivered, his arms trembled. You're doing it," Zeke whispered behind her. "You always could." Isa took a breath, then, slowly, impossibly, she shifted her weight, one shaky step forward. Then, another. The 3rd step came faster, and she stumbled into Jonathan's waiting arms. He caught her, pulled her tight, laughed and sobbed at the same time. "You did it," he whispered into her ear. "You really did it." Isa pulled back, smiling at Zeke. "You said I would." Zeke smiled softly. "I said we'd try." No one left the park quickly that day. They stayed, they hugged, they whispered. Some prayed. No, one could quite believe what they'd seen, but none of them would ever forget it. That night, back in the quiet kitchen, Jonathan stood by the counter, watching as Zeke poured himself a bowl of cereal. The house wasn't silent like it used to. Now it breathed laughter, movement, life. "Zeke," Jonathan said softly. The boy glanced up. "You know you've changed everything." Zeke looked down at his cereal. I did? Jonathan smiled. You made my daughter walk today, and you made this house feel alive again. Zeke's voice stayed. Quiet. That's what my mom would have wanted. Jonathan's throat tightened. I wish she could have seen this. Zeke barely whispered. She did. That moment hung in the air, not heavy, not sad, but full. Full of something only two people who had lost everything could fully understand. Word spreads faster than anyone expects. What happened that Sunday beneath the old oak tree, the impossible steps of a little girl, and the quiet boy who made it happen, becomes something far bigger than all of them. It starts small. A nurse from Children's Medical Center, walking her dog through the park that morning, saw everything. She doesn't interrupt, doesn't speak, but later that night she shares the story with a friend who shares it with another friend and another. By Monday, whispers have reached the hospital. Is it true? Did Isa Reeves really stand? Was it that boy, the one who used to sit by the hospital doors? Doctors, nurses, therapists, they all start asking questions. Some out of curiosity, some out of disbelief, some out of quiet hope. By midweek, the phone rings in Jonathan's office. It's a physical therapist who worked with Isa months earlier. Jonathan, is it true? Jonathan pauses. It's true. The therapist exhales. How? Jonathan smiles faintly. A boy with no degree, no equipment, and no reason to believe except that he did. The story keeps growing. By the next Sunday, they're not alone at the park anymore. Two families are waiting by the oak tree. One has a teenage son recovering from a car accident. The other, a girl learning to walk again after a stroke. Both had heard whispers about the boy who helps kids walk. Zeke arrives like always, same old jacket, same duct-taped boots, same quiet focus. When he sees the new families, he glances at Jonathan. Jonathan kneels beside him. You don't have to do this. Zeke shakes his head. I want to. That day Zeke works not just with Isa, but with the two new kids. He shows their parents how to heat the rice packs just right, how to stretch gently, how to wait and listen for tiny signs the body is ready to remember. And when the parents start crying, when hope breaks across their faces, Zeke never makes it about himself. He simply whispers to the children, "You're not broken. You're just learning a different kind of strong." By the following weekend, 5 more families arrive. A local pastor brings folding chairs, a diner nearby drops off coffee and bagels, and someone prints flyers. Free movement classes, Sundays at noon, Harrington Park. The crowd grows, not loud, not flashy, but steady, consistent. People aren't there for a miracle. They're there because someone made them believe in possible again. And then, one day, a local reporter arrives, notebook in hand, camera at her side. She watches silently, observes the boy who never boasts, who kneels before each child like every small movement is sacred. When Jonathan notices her, he pulls Zeke aside. You okay with this? Zeke glances around at the families, at Isa helping a new girl with her ankle stretches. He nods. As long as it's not about me, it's about them. The article runs that Sunday in the Birmingham Post. 9-year-old with a gift helps dozens heal in a city park. No full name, no address, just Zeke. The quiet boy with the old jacket and the hands that knew how to listen. But people start to find out anyway. A local doctor offers mentorship. A non-profit donates some basic equipment. A retired therapist volunteers. To train parents, a college tutor offers Zeke free lessons. Whenever he's ready, for the first time since his mother passed. People don't just see Zeke, they believe in him. Yet through it all, Zeke remains exactly the same. The same towel, the same duct-taped boots, the same quiet smile, the same soft voice telling every child, we're not giving up. The boy who once sat invisible by the hospital doors had become the center of something far bigger than himself, not because he tried to build it, but because he simply showed up. Again and again and again. It's been 9 Sundays, 9 weeks of towels spread on the grass, of whispered encouragements, of tiny miracles. But this Sunday feels different. Even before they arrive, Zeke senses it. The breeze is softer. The air carries a quiet kind of electricity, and Ida sits in the back seat of the SUV, with a focus in her eyes Jonathan has never seen before. As they pull into Harrington Park, the scene before them feels almost surreal. There are families setting up folding chairs, therapists kneeling beside, young patients, mothers holding coffee cups with trembling hands, children giggling between stretches, and right in the center of it all, beneath the old oak tree, waits that same worn-out bench, Zeke's bench. He doesn't say anything, doesn't need to. He simply unfolds the towel, places the rice pack by his side, and locks eyes with Issa. "You ready?" he whispers. She nods. No smile this time, just determination. Jonathan positions himself behind her, steadying her shoulders. Zeke kneels in front, guiding her legs into place. "Same as always," he says softly. "We help you stand. You do the rest." The park grows silent, not just for Issa, but for every child, every parent, every set of eyes now watching. The breeze slows, even the trees seem to lean in. On 3, Zeke counts. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan gently lifts. Zeke steadies her knees. And Issa, for the first time, stands. Her legs quiver, her arms shake. But she's standing, on her own. The park remains frozen. One mother gasps. A father places his hand over his mouth. Issa's breathing steadies. She opens her eyes. Her lips part into a soft smile. "I'm standing," she whispers. Jonathan can't breathe. His hands slowly release from under her arms. He steps back. She stays upright. His voice cracks. She's doing it," Zeke whispers calmly. "She's been doing it." Issa closes her eyes. Her brow furrows, and then, like it's the most natural thing in the world, she takes one step, then another, then a third, until finally her small frame leans forward, and she falls softly into her father's arms. Jonathan catches her, laughing, crying, his hands trembling as he whispers, "You did it. You really did it." Issa looks over at Zeke. "You said I would." He smiles gently. "I said we'd try." That afternoon, no one rushes to leave the park. People stay, they talk, they hug, some pray. Zeke simply sits back on his bench, watching, quiet, content. That night, back at the Reeves home, Jonathan stands in the kitchen. Zeke pours himself a bowl of cereal at the small kitchen table. Jonathan watches him for a long moment, then softly says, "You know you changed everything." Zeke doesn't look up. "I did." Jonathan steps closer, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "My daughter walked today, and not because of a hospital, not because of some new therapy, not because of luck. She walked because a kid with nothing, with no home, no family, no title, chose to show up again and again, even when no one asked him to." Zeke finally looks up, his voice steady. "It's what my mom would have done." Jonathan swallows hard. "I wish she could have seen this." Zeke smiles faintly. "She did. She sees everything." Jonathan's throat tightens. "You're going to change a lot of lives, kid." Zeke's eyes never waver. "I already am, because sometimes the ones with nothing to give are the ones who give the most, not because they have to."